Hey folks, this is Chris Johnson at Living Waters Fly Fishing, back with another fly tying video for you today. Today, very own fly pattern called the pinch hitter. Umpqua Feather Merchants has picked up this little crayfish pattern for next year, so in the meantime you're going to have to learn how to tie it. So it's not available to the public yet, but it will be very shortly. So we'll go over all the particulars of how to tie it, what each material does, and we'll even show you what this fly looks like in the water. But this is an incredibly effective bass pattern. We catch Guadalupe bass on it like crazy, largemouth bass on it like crazy, everything eats it. And so we just want to show you what this fly is all about, how to effectively tie it, so we're going to go ahead and get started.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to take our time with this one because I think there's a lot to talk about that makes a lot of sense when it comes to tying this fly. And I'm going to try to demystify it as much as I can. To start out, the pinch hitter fly that we're tying today, this fly utilizes a very unique hook, and you can see that it is a bend back hook here. This right here is the XS 435, and this hook is incredibly strong, very uniquely shaped, and fits the job here perfectly simply because it allows the crayfish to kind of sit up off the bottom in a very unique posture, and when you go to swim the fly, it will pitch and roll and kind of swim a little bit side to side, looking just like the erratic flight path, if you will, of an escaping crayfish from any sort of predatory fish. So to get started, what we're going to do is lay down a little thread base. You can start right there behind the eye, just kind of work your way down. Nothing real fancy here. You just want to stop right there at that little notch. So right where the bend back actually happens, come in there, trim that little tag off. And we are going to utilize a kind of a newer material for the shop. I know they've been out for a little while, but these things are great. They're actually made by Sightcast. It's these little hotspot eyes, and I don't know how well that shows up on camera, so I apologize if it doesn't. But nonetheless, these little lead eyes are actually, they're painted or coated to where they actually have this really great coloration that, kind of really accents the fly nicely, in my opinion, where you don't have this, real gaudy lead eye with, eye spots or something like that, or where you have just kind of a plain lead eye that really doesn't add to the overall appearance of the fly. I feel like this set of eyes gives this fly rather a very finished look, and overall just I think really completes it in such a way that I think this fly just looks amazing with these little painted leads on here. So lead dumbbell eyes, this is a size small. If you look, it's a 4mm small, and this is in the olive color. I think they've got that highlighted there for you as well. So Sightcast makes some incredible flies and some incredible tying products, so I'd highly encourage you to check them out as well. All right, the very next step is we are going to take this thread and migrate it down the hook. As we do so, just kind of getting it towards the rear here, let's stop just right behind the hook point. And we're going to utilize another material that I'm very fond of, and that is this perfect rubber. It's a type of rubber leg that actually floats when you get it on the water. So if you're using it for poppers, hair bugs, anything like that, it actually floats. If you're using it for subsurface flies like we are here, it will actually cause these legs to float up and away from the fly, lifting the rear of this crawfish pattern up off the bottom. So we're going to use these little legs out the back to represent the antennae. And we're going to take a single leg here and we're going to cut it in half. So just like so. Now, I've put legs on in the past where you can, make a loop out of them. I've seen some people where they just tie it over at once. Here I have found, more recently tying this fly, instead of making the loops like I normally do, I actually tie these in tandem, where I'll cut them in, I'll cut the leg in half, and I'll tie this in, and as I do, I'm going to just kind of pull the leg under tension towards the rear of the hook and work this thread down the bend of the hook. And we're going to tie this leg into the bend of the hook ever so slightly. About right there is where we're wanting to stop. And so this is going to spread those legs out really nice. Make sure they don't roll around on you too much. And this is the reason that I kind of got away from tying these in with the loops, is that now, once I've really got that seated in there, you can see I can put a lot of thread tension down here, and I don't have to worry about that rolling on me at all. They're in place. They're where I want. They're splayed just off the side of the hook. I'll try to pull that one out so you can see it there. But that's exactly it, is we just want two of those sticking out the rear of the hook just like that. If you want, you can tie the rest of this material down, and then I just trim off whatever's left kind of close to the eyes. That's it. Secure down any loose ends here. That allows us to not have to put as much dubbing on the fly here in just a moment. We're going to get this thread back to the posterior of the hook. And here's where dubbing comes in. And there's tons of dubbings. I know these are probably too large for screens, but there's, craw dub. You've got Dave Whitlock's SLF dubbing. You've got Squirrel SLF dubbing. There's all kinds of stuff you can use here. Today we're going to use this Dave Whitlock SLF dubbing. This is going to be in the Red Squirrel Nymph Abdomen. I love this stuff. It is absolutely incredible. Makes a great underbelly for any crayfish pattern. And if you'll see here, you've just got this really great dubbing mix with natural fibers and a lot of synthetic in there. So it's really, really user-friendly. What we're going to do is create a dubbing noodle here. So we're just kind of dubbing this on. We're not spinning a dubbing loop or anything of that sort. Just want a dubbing noodle right here on the tail end of the hook. And it's okay for this dubbing noodle to be pretty bulky. What we're going to do is basically form a bump. It's just going to be a round dubbing sphere is what we're after. And that right there is going to give us the little shape we're going to need on the back side of this fly to separate the claws. So kind of hold the legs where you need them. That way it doesn't get caught in your thread. And we're kind of dubbing just right on top of itself. You're going to kind of form this little dubbing sphere. And that's what we want right there. If you have a little too much like I do here, you can kind of pick it away to finish it out. And that's all we want. We're just kind of creating that little dubbing ball. I had just a little bit too much, but not much. That's what we're wanting. Just kind of flatten that out. Get it how you want it. That little sphere is what is going to separate the claws when we add those in just a second. So I'm going to pick this little excess dubbing off my thread. I always tell people, less is more. And, when you're trying to use more, sometimes it's hard to use just the right amount. So we're going to take a squirrel zonker. These are micro squirrel zonkers. You can use this in a sculpin olive. I used to use this golden chub color and that's what this is here, but it's just kind of a reddish version of it that Hairline Dubbing used to put out, but they have since discontinued that color. I would really recommend tying this fly in like a sculpin olive or a light olive. It works great. I fished it in brown. I fished it in burnt orange. All those colors have produced just extraordinarily well. And we also use a black and red one sometimes in the spring as well, which works really well. So we're going to take this little squirrel zonker. We're going to pick off a little of the fur right here to where we have a little bare spot. And we're going to add this on the side of the fly just like that. And if you'll notice what that's going to do is when we do this, you'll see that that dubbing ball there, that little sphere of dubbing, is going to kick that little claw out to the side. We're going to repeat that same process with this other one. So you just want two little short sections of squirrel zonker, and you're going to take that, tie it in right behind that little sphere of dubbing there, and we're going to wrap that all the way rearward. Try not to catch any of that fur. We need that stuff there. And what that's going to do is that's going to separate those claws for us. I think you can see that pretty clear. The claws are separated out to the sides. Makes a really, really great profile in the water. And if you want, since there's no real harm or foul here because we're about to dub back over this, just tie the remnants of that down. That kind of guarantees that these little zonkers aren't going to pull out. Just tie them down nice and firmly. And now we are ready for the next step on this fly. What we're going to do here is add more dubbing. So same stuff, that Dave Whitlock SLF and that Red Squirrel Abdomen. Red Squirrel Nymph Abdomen, I love this color. We're just same thing, dubbing noodle. One of the keys here, don't be too generous with this. And on this side, on the bump in the back, I really like kind of a larger circular bump back there, or a spherical bump, just so that there's this really, really defined spot where the claws are divided and it kind of keeps them apart during the retrieve of if I decide to swim this fly. But here, I don't want this to get too bulky. So normally I'll start the dubbing right up against the claws, and that's what I want. So you can see right there that if I basically come over this, my goal is to where you can see dubbing touching dubbing, where the sphere of dubbing in the rear, it's going to attach or touch the abdomen of this fly as we move forward. And we're going to just kind of step this down, and you can see how it just kind of tapers down ever so slightly till we get all the way up to the eyes. And so that's kind of the general shape, kind of that general crawfish shape. Little thicker on this side, little thinner up towards the eyes. And don't get too happy with it, like don't use too much of it. Otherwise, what's going to wind up happening is you're going to have a fly that falls a little slower. And here I like these small size eyes. This is a size 6 hook right here, and I think that's just a perfect balance for sink rate. If you tie this, I tie it up to about a size 4. If you jump above a size 4 in this hook, it's going to take rabbit for the back of the fly. You can still use squirrel for the claws, but it will take rabbit for the back, or you'll have to cut your own squirrel zonker just because they don't come that thick. Very next step is we're going to add another, so this is just another perfect rubber leg. We've cut it in half. I'm simply going to pass over it once, tuck that leg up under those eyes, position it, make a few wraps. So you can do that right there. That is one method of tie-in. I like this too because one leg's going to hang down a little bit more. So here, if you'll look at this, when the legs are at rest, I'm going to kind of take this one and position it towards the side. We're going to have more materials to do that, but you'll notice that one of these is going to hang down a little bit. That's going to become really important here in just a minute, and you'll see why once we put the fly in the water. That actually aids in helping this fly prop itself up when you're fishing it to, real finicky bass in a sight fishing situation. And so that right there is what we want. Just tie over it. You'll notice that does the same thing. We have two legs that are kind of positioned right between the eyes. You can see that right there. And then two legs that will be off to the side of the fly. We really don't want anything to clear that 180 plane on the top side of the hook. So when you flip this over, this one's still getting a little high for me. I'll tug him down. But I want everything kind of below that side of the hook. That's what we're really after here. So take these legs, kind of position those appropriately. Make a few securing wraps. And grab you some more dubbing. This right here, just more of the same. That Dave Whitlock SLF. We're going to add a little thread here. Don't be very generous here. This is going to be pretty concise and to the point. We don't want to overdub this section of the fly. Otherwise, it gets a little unruly. Keep this pretty slim, pretty straightforward. Just a nice, neat little dubbing noodle there. And what we're going to do is take these legs, all 4 of them, try to grab these, and I normally grab them all and pull them to the side, kind of making a V like that. And once I've done so, I'm going to dub right there behind the eyes. You'll notice that really reins these things in the way I want. You'll see those 2 that are kind of sticking out to the side, and then we've got 2, sorry, there's another one at the rear there. But these 2 here, they're going to hang out to the side, and we're going to have 2 that are hanging a little bit further below. Now all I'm going to do is take this and dub in between those eyes to really give it a finished look. That's what I want. That also is going to kind of cushion the blow when this thing hits the water. So we've kind of covered our tracks more or less. That's what we're after. So legs off to the side, legs off to the side. You'll see they all kind of droop down nice and neat. We've got a nice dubbed section between those eyes. Build yourself just a tiny little ramp here to do whatever else we're going to do. And we have 2 more steps and the fly's over aside from some trimming. We are going to take, and I know this is going to appear very large on screen, this is Whiting Farms Spey Soft Hackle Chickabou is what this is. So this is kind of that Chickabou portion of one of their Spey line birds there that they've got at the farm. And this is just kind of a golden brown color. You can use burnt orange, you can use olive, anything works. I'm taking a single feather off this. And the thing I like about this is it's not as bushy as some forms of Chickabou. It's going to be elongated where it's going to be almost have a little leggier look to it, which is great for this fly. Slick that down, kind of loose loop method, tie that in. So just make a loose loop wrap backwards on it towards the rear of the hook, and then just a little tip to kind of help you keep your eye clear on this. Pull this part of the feather up, insert your scissors, press them into the feather and trim. And if you look, I don't have any feather that's coming past that eye there. I see a lot of people when they trim Marabou that becomes a very, very large issue, is crowding the eye. So if you'll look, you make a couple of wraps, that's clean as a whistle. That's exactly what I want. We have plenty of Chickabou on there for this fly. That's exactly what we're after. The final step is to add one final piece of squirrel zonker. Now, make sure that if you're tying squirrel zonker that you get one that's wide enough, because we're going to punch this through the hook. If you're using micro, it's going to be a little hard to punch this thing through there and not tear the zonker. A standard squirrel zonker is probably going to work a little bit better here. So all I'm going to do is kind of pull that Chickabou feather up and kind of let it naturally fall on either side of that hook. I'm going to push it down with my finger to make sure that it kind of separates naturally. Kind of splays out across that hook point. And I'm going to come in here. I picked myself a little bald spot there on that zonker. You can see it, just so I get a really firm tie-in point. The important part here is that we don't want any of the bald spot to show when we tie it in. So it's okay to tie that section in, we just don't want it to show. I'm going to make wraps back towards the actual squirrel, and I'm going to come in here, at least to the rear of the fly. I'm going to come in here and trim this zonker off as close as I can get it. And it may take a couple little hits at it to get it exactly right. Pull all that chickaboo back. And that right there is what we want. Just this nice clean head. You see we've still got plenty of eye here to work with. That's exactly it. Building a small thread head there, moving it back up. And then all we're going to do to finish this fly is we're going to grab our whip finisher and drop it first. And we'll take this and just throw a couple of whip finishes right here at the head of the fly. So nothing overly complicated on that end. Once we've done so, the final step to this, trim that off, we're going to take this piece of squirrel zonker here, once again splaying out that chickaboo, making sure that we don't have anything that's captured or looped. I want to try to pull that. You'll see we got a couple unruly ones there. Stroke those rearward. Take that zonker, pull it up like this. Take your finger and kind of roll that zonker into that hook point and leave yourself enough slack that when it makes contact, put it right in the middle, and you have to pull the hook out of the vise for this. Punch it through that squirrel zonker. And it's going to take a little bit of force because that leather's pretty hard. Clamp that right back in your vise, and you'll notice now we formed the rear or the back of the fly, and that's what we're after. The final portion of this is literally just trimming. So we're going to come in here, and I'll take these legs. Here's just a little recommendation. You're going to notice that you've got one leg on each side that's going to sit on the bottom. Take those and cut those a singular length here. So we're going to do this. You'll see that it leaves them and kind of pokes them up just like that. Those work as a little prop to allow this fly to sit up even more. Take the other legs that are slightly higher, trim those a little bit shorter. So come in here, turn it over, come up next to that leg, trim those a little shorter. Now, those will sit out to the side when the fly's on the bottom, and you'll notice they sit just perfectly to the side. Those act as stability, keeping the fly from rolling over from side to side. The two on the bottom help the fly push itself up and leave itself off the bottom there. The antennae out the back, we're going to trim the claws a little bit shorter. You can leave them long if you want to. If you want more movement, that's fine. But the first order of business here, you'll notice we've got 3 squirrel strips. We've got a claw, the remnant of the back here, that extra that we had, and we have this right here, which is the other claw. The tricky part is we have to come in here and trim the back off. And this is the hardest part of the entire fly, is making sure that you do not trim your legs when you do this. Trim that as close as you can. Right there, you can see where that's trimmed out. Now we're left with his claws, and we don't have that third strip poking out the back. Take these legs. I'm going to trim these just a little bit longer than the claws. That's it right there. And I'm going to shorten these claws just a little bit. For a size 4, these would be appropriate. For a size 6, these are a little bit long. When I trim zonker, I try to actually insert the scissors, make that little snip. It cuts them back, and then something I see a lot of people do, and it might even actually be easier to do this separately real quick. I think I can probably do this and show everybody. But when you trim zonker, for instance, you'll see the skin side, poke that scissor right through there and give that a trim. But you'll notice it's really hard to get that exact. So what I'm going to do is actually take it, and you see I can get that skin up under. Like if I take this, it's going to be a little hard to see on camera. I apologize. But here, I'm going to take this and actually just trim the skin to where I get a really even trim, and that way it goes leather directly to fur. There's not this little tab out there or these half-cut, little stubble fur. I don't want that either. I want these to be really, really clean. So I'm going to repeat that process here. I'm going to tuck this thing up underneath there, trim it nice and neat, and if you'll look, this is what I got off. I just cut skin off that didn't have any long fur on it. And I know that might be a little bit hard to see, but that's exactly what we're after. We just don't want any useless piece of zonker on there. We want it to be really, really clean, really exact. Take your claws, pinch them together here. You'll see that the one closer to the camera is ever so slightly shorter. So we're going to come in here and trim the one that's opposite of it. About right there. Take this guy, insert those scissors up underneath that zonker strip. Trim that away. That's going to give us a nice clean look. That right there, I'll put a little bit of epoxy or something like that. That or a UV cure. Even head cement's fine if you're in a hurry and you don't really need a finished look on the fly. This is just a great, great crawfish pattern for the Texas Hill Country and beyond. And as you can see, it's not overly complicated to tie, but this is just an absolute winner to have in your box. And I'm going to let you in on something that's just a dirty little secret. If you have no background in tournament bass fishing, you have no idea what this is. But these are die markers that they use to actually, you can touch up. It's just a little marker that you unscrew here, and it has a marker face on it that allows you to dye rubber. So you can actually paint a dye onto a plastic worm or something like that. And they make this scented and unscented. I don't use the scented ones. You'll see that it says unscented on there. But Spike It makes these, and a lot of people don't carry the markers in like tackle shops and things like that. Go online. You can buy these online. But this is a great way if you want to actually dye the tips of these little rubber legs. You can dye them blue, you can dye them orange. Just a really cool thing that a lot of folks in the fly fishing world don't know about. But you can dye rubber legs just with a touch of these dye markers, and they work just extremely well. They're real color fast, and they're a great thing to keep on your fly tying bench. So hit this thing with some head cement. You're off to the races. You're ready to fish it. And we'll take a look at how this thing actually sits up in the water so y'all can see that firsthand and really kind of see what this fly is all about, where it kind of just allows itself to be fished stationary and it does all the work for you. So we'll take a look at that right now. Alrighty, folks, we have a pinch hitter here in a little test tank. You can see how the back of that fly sits up like that, and those claws splay out, and the fly rights itself every single time based on the bend of that hook and the aid of those rubber legs that actually float. So you'll see that this thing, it sticks up, claws splay, rights itself, and you can just crawl it along the bottom. Still plenty of action. You'll see that bottom of that fly, or excuse me, the legs of that fly will actually prop back up after you swim it, just like that. And that's what we're after. That's why this fly is so effective on selective bass in the Central Texas Hill Country and beyond. So put a few in your fly box, tie one on, go fish it at a local waterway here, and I think you will enjoy the results. Thank y'all so much for watching. As always, do not hesitate to call the shop if you have any questions, and if you need any of the materials for the fly, we're happy to help you out there as well. We'll see you next time.